In the beginning, there were those who came before, a precursor race known only as the First Civilization. They came to Earth and created mankind, a slave race built to obey and serve them. To control them, pieces of Eden were forged, extremely powerful artifacts with the ability to manipulate their neurotransmitters. Soon after, a crossbreed of the First Civilization and man was born. These hybrid humans had the DNA of the First Civilization within them that made them resistant to the powers of the pieces of Eden. Mankind, led by the hybrids Adam and Eve, finally revolted, and so began the war between man and their creators. As the war raged on, a disaster was looming from across the stars. Juno, Jupiter and Minerva, members of the Capitoline Triad, learned that a solar flare from the sun would strike the Earth, destroying all upon it. They tried to find different solutions to protect the world, but all failed. One solution was to transfer the mind to a more solid texture. Juno tried to test this theory on her husband, Aita, but like all the experiments before, it failed. His spirit began to deteriorate, and she had no choice but to end its suffering. Before killing him, she was able to reincarnate Aita in the form of the sages. These were men throughout time with memories and DNA in common with Aita. After the death of Aita, Juno developed a hatred for all mankind, and began looking for a way to dominate the world. When Minerva and Jupiter heard of her treacherous plan, they decided to imprison her within one of the temples. Over time, Minerva finally found a solution. She developed a pedestal called the Eye, a device that required one simple touch to save the world. But she soon realised that Juno had reconfigured the machine so that it would release her from her prison upon activation. Minerva decided to destroy the machine, condemning the world to their fate. This was the Toba catastrophe. Learning that another disaster was inevitable, Minerva decided to build a second device in a last-ditch effort to save the future. She messaged an assassin called Desmond Miles, asking him to save the world by finding the temples of those who came before. After the complete extinction of the First Civilization, man entered a new era, unaware of the risks their descendants would face. In 2012, as he explored the Animus, learning the skills of his assassin ancestors, Desmond Miles came into contact with Minerva, warning him of the disaster and that it would strike on the 21st of the 12th, 2012. His quest led him to meet Tinia, also known as Jupiter, who showed him the location of the Grand Temple hidden within the bowels of New York. After opening the doors of the Grand Temple, Desmond found himself face to face with Juno, who told him to save the world he had to simply touch the pedestal. This was in fact the first pedestal, the one that Minerva thought she destroyed, but Juno managed to repair it during her imprisonment within the temple. Just before she died, Minerva arrived through the second eye she created. She explained to Desmond that Juno had corrupted the pedestal, and that touching it would save the world, but it would also free the imprisoned Juno. She pleaded with him to let the world suffer from the disaster, rather than let Juno enslave them all. He refused and chose to prevent the disaster, releasing Juno from her prison. According to him, humanity would find the strength to fight against her. This is how Desmond's story ends. On the 21st of December 2012, Juno is released from her prison and prepares her vengeance on all mankind. But the story doesn't end there. It is our duty to tell you what happens next. Dear initiates, welcome to the next chapter.
After the death of his son, William Miles decided to leave the Brotherhood to mourn the passing of Desmond, and in doing so he gave leadership of the Brotherhood to Gavin, who was an old assassin and good friend of William's, and he asked him to rebuild the Assassin Order. He gave him his journal, which contained all his knowledge about the Brotherhood, as well as some information about future missions which were hidden in the form of puzzles. Even though William decided to leave the Brotherhood, Sean and Rebecca decided to stay, and they joined Gavin's ship, the Altair II, in May 2013, and Sean was still clearly choked by William's decision to leave the Brotherhood, but Gavin insisted that Sean turn the page and focus on further missions. Meanwhile, Rebecca was working on the new communication network for the assassins. By decrypting William's journal, Gavin learned that the assassins had to head to Osaka in Japan, while at the same time, Sean and Rebecca went back to the USA in order to have eyes in the States, so they settled in Texas, waiting for their new mission. 2 months later in Oklahoma City, Rebecca contacted Gavin and informed him that she and Sean were going to search for Desmond's body in order to discover what Abstergo planned to do with Desmond's DNA. In September, the pair halted in Nebraska and they discovered that Abstergo Entertainment was looking for new employees for a very strange project related to the Animus. So after hearing this, they decided to start an investigation into this and find out what this strange Animus project could be. As they were making their way through the USA, they arrived at the farm where Desmond grew up, and for them it was a moment to think about their old friend and everything that happened from their time together. With Sean and Rebecca hunting down answers in America, Gavin and the other members of the crew of the Altair 2 were in Honolulu Harbor in Hawaii. Susan Drayton, the captain of the ship, and Eric Kuber, the navigator of the Altair 2, didn't understand why they still weren't in Osaka yet, as it was told in William's journal. They questioned Gavin, and he explained that the contact in Osaka didn't respond, which was quite unusual. This whole situation was strange, something just didn't feel right. So on the safe side of things, they decide to buy weapons just in case any trouble crops up once they arrive in Osaka. Back in the States, Sean and Rebecca were still investigating on Abstergo Entertainment, and they finally had a breakthrough. They found an intriguing interview from Olivia Garneau, the Chief Creative Officer of Abstergo Entertainment Studios, and the assassins learnt that this studio had opened in 2012 and was settled in Montreal. So they decide to pack up and head to Montreal to try and gain access to discover more on Abstergo's plans. The other initiates also knew that something was going on in Montreal. They had heard that Abstergo were hiding a blood vial in their studios, so they also decided to infiltrate the Abstergo building in order to retrieve this vial of blood. On the 29th of October, Sean and Rebecca were finally ready. They infiltrated Abstergo Entertainment and started grabbing as much information as they could. At the same time, a new employee arrived in the studio. He was about to start work on a strange project under the title of Sample 17. One thing they did know was regarding the employee John, who works at the head of the IT department. He was a very intriguing guy and a lot of employees in the studio thought so. And finally, our fellow initiates infiltrated the building and picked up the vial. But whose blood was in this vial? After a few days, the atmosphere inside Abstergo Entertainment was tense. The fact that the new employee was working on Edward Kenway made his colleagues jealous, and moreover a few hackers were identified in the studio and a few employees had just suddenly disappeared. Also, John himself had disappeared, and the rumours were rife. Some people said he was fired, others said that he was dead. At the beginning of December 2013, Rebecca informed Gavin that John, who was actually their internal spy at Abstergo, was in fact dead, but they had a new spy. It was the new employee who was working on the Edward Kenway saga. Sean and Rebecca had to leave. Too many things were happening at Abstergo, and they just couldn't risk drawing too much attention on themselves. On the 3rd of December, our spy had finally infiltrated the new network of the assassins. This helped us to have more information about the Brotherhood actions, while the day after that, Gavin explored the city of Osaka. He discovered that all the assassins were murdered, and he was very touched when he learned that one of the defunct assassins who was his contact was also his old mentor. He ordered the other assassins to look after the survivors and to find who committed these murders. 2 days later, Emmett Leary, an assassin who specialised in new technologies, discovered who exactly it was that ordered the massacres. And in reality, it was not Abstergo, but the Yakuza, most especially the Onmarokai Gumi, reputed as being extremely dangerous. So Gavin decided to go meet their leader. Him and Emmanuel Barraza, the ship's armour and weapons instructor, went to their headquarters. That's when they met a guard in front of the main door, and this guard attacked Gavin and a fight began between the two men. Emmanuel understood very quickly that the Onmorokagumi were also part of the Brotherhood, so he intervened to stop the fight but was injured by the hidden blade of the guard. After this incident, Gavin finally met the new mentor of Osaka, a 78-year-old woman who was the wife of his old dead mentor, and the assassins spent time together. They exchanged weapons, contacts and knowledge, and the Japanese gave Gavin a brand new Animus model stolen from the Abstergo factory. The assassins were able to end this year peacefully. On the 2nd of January 2014, Gavin went back to decrypting William's journal in order to discover where their new mission will be set. At the end of February, the assassins discovered that they had to go to Moscow in Russia. Their destination was an old assassin lab situated around the capital, but the strange thing was that even Abstergo ignored the existence of this lab. At the same time, an unknown woman was seen near St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. Her name was Galina Voronina, and at the beginning of March, the assassin team split. Gavin and Emmanuel were hurtling towards Moscow on the Trans-Siberian Railway, while the rest of the team was sailing to St. Petersburg. On the 16th of March, Gavin met the mysterious assassin Galina. She had asked him to help her assassinate her mother, a scientist assassin who had gone mad because of the bleeding effect. She had built her own Animus model and forced her fellow scientists to use it. She also pretended to be in contact with the old entity called Eve. After taking time to think about this, the assassin decided to go into the lab, which was now full of mad assassins courtesy of the bleeding effect. Inside, Galina killed them all with her double hidden blades, and once the zone was secured, the assassins went deeper into the lab. That's when they saw Galina's mother. She was still tied to her Animus machine, which seems to be an old machine, and she was just babbling on something about her lost husband and the colour grey, clearly the bleeding effect nonsense. There were monitors all on every wall. It was just static, but it looked as though there was a face in there as well, a very well-known face but unrecognisable at the same time. Galina jumped over her mother and stabbed her in the brain with her blade. On the monitors, the face was fading away, but before it disappeared, it seemed as though the face just screamed. A few days later, Gavin joined the rest of the crew aboard the Altair II in St. Petersburg. He had convinced Galina, the last member of the Russian Brotherhood, to come with them. She revealed to the assassins that even she had used her mother's Animus to gain her ancestors' assassin skills, but unlike the other assassins, she wasn't touched by the bleeding effect. The assassin decided to rebuild the Russian Brotherhood with the help of the assassins from the rest of the world. Gavin's message was clear: the assassins are not alone anymore, they need to unite. At the beginning of April 2014, after the events in Russia, the assassins sailed to Helsinki, Finland. Gavin was in a foul mood since he left Russia, maybe because the Brotherhood had lost teams in Brisbane, Whistler, Florence, Denver and now Moscow. There was only half a cell remaining in Osaka, and finally Sao Paulo hadn't been heard from in over 2 years. Moreover, Gavin couldn't handle any more of William's silence. He wanted his friend back among the assassins, and on the 24th of April, Gavin arrived with his fellow assassins and threw William's journal on the table, shouting and demanding, "Find him! Find me William Miles!" By decrypting his journal, he finally discovered where the old mentor was hidden, and this was actually in Norway, and on the 1st of May, the assassins arrived at William's bunker, and the old assassin, he was clearly surprised to have some company, but he didn't show it, and Gavin was even more surprised when he realised that Sean and Rebecca were with William prior to Gavin finding out where he was. Gavin gave William his journal back, and told him that he felt like William had played him. William reminded him that he had lost his own son, and that he felt like it was over, but yet he felt like he had to come back because the fight of the assassins is bigger than him and bigger than his son. A few days later, while she was aboard the Altair II to perform maintenance, Rebecca discovered that someone inside the crew was a spy who sent messages to the initiate database, which intrigued Gavin. What is an initiate? Our spy was almost discovered, we had to be careful. Gavin and William decided to interrogate every single member of the crew to find out who the spy was, except Galina, as she clearly arrived too late to be the spy. William started by interrogating Susan Drayden, the captain of the ship, and then the rest of the crew. Finally, he discovered that the spy was Stephanie Chu, the ship's medical officer, and he ordered Galina to execute her because of the act of treason over the Brotherhood. But Eric Cooper, the secondary captain of the ship, intervened, and he admitted to being one of the spies. After a short time thinking, William admitted that he was impressed by these spies, and he decided to spare them, thinking that the Initiates might be some great allies of the Assassins. Even Rebecca was impressed and fascinated by the Initiates, in particular by the way they communicate with each other. In June 2014, Gavin and William had another serious discussion about the death of Desmond Miles, and William's decision to leave the Brotherhood. William explained that Desmond's death gave him the feeling that everything was lost, but the fact that Abstergo had his body made him furious, and gave him the strength to come back into the Brotherhood. Gavin confessed that he had lost all hope. For him, the war was already lost. William agreed, but explained that with the help of the Initiates, it could change. After that, Sean and Rebecca's task was to get closer to the Initiates. On the 16th of June 2014, after he hacked the Initiates website, Sean sent a message to the Initiates and he congratulated us for having an eye on the Assassins for so much time. But he also gave us a proposal: fight for the Brotherhood, fight for a true cause, and he told us that if we worked together we might be able to rebuild the Brotherhood to win the war against the Templars in order to free the world from their hands. Stay tuned, Assassins, we shall speak to you all very soon, and we remain your humble spies.